All right.
Hello.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yep. You hear me?
Yeah. Good stuff. Are you not? You're not in the car this time.
I thought, yeah, it's a bit dull in there.
Yeah, you're in. You look like you're in some kind of I don't know, Dingley Dell.
Fantasy location.
Yeah.
The forest of the first maroon plonker. I've been so busy trying to find somewhere with half decent internet that I was going to write all these questions, but just do it off the cuff. And also, now that I've got here, there's midges everywhere.
Have you got that? What's that spray called? There's a really good spray.
Oh, the one that's actually a skin so soft. No.
No, I don't. No, it's called. It's gonna annoy me. It's called something like Midge. It's called something like Zidge or Twidge or something.
Oh, right.
Because I always get bitten by it. Because I go to Scotland like quite a lot, and it's like in Scotland you just get like eaten alive by midges.
Yeah.
This one actually works. It's the only one I found that actually works. I'll look it up and I'll recommend it to you.
I've got some stuff which I was told people on Sky use called Skin So Soft, which is actually a skin softener.
Oh, right, yeah, okay, yeah.
Don't like it.
Yeah. Sky's all right though, because Sky's windy, so they get blown away. The problem is when you're inland.
Yeah,
that's where they
really bad when I was there, but yeah.
Yeah. There's
maybe that's why.
Yeah, there's a place, well, quite a few places over in the Scottish borders. I quite like to go camping, and because inland is just like nuts. Yeah, they're just crazy.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid going to Galloway and coming back and just doubled in size with all the boils on.
Occupational hazard for I don't know, someone living in the cottage doing whatever it is that you do. How do you describe your profession now?
Not quite sure. I'm a writer and an artist, darling.
Writer and an artist, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be nice to actually. Sorry?
In County Durham.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you live in Durham or Northumberland, is it, where you are?
Well, technically where I am, because it's like just south of Gateshead, so technically it's County Durham, yeah, but it's still in Gateshead though. So I think it's in Tyne and Wear. If I mean, the counties are kind of like, you don't really do counties anymore, do we? But technically it's in Tyne and Wear, yeah. But in the old days it would have been County Durham, because the Tyne was the border between Northumberland and County Durham, and we're just south of the Tyne.
Right. Yeah. I'll be over your way in a month.
Yeah. Oh really?
Kind of thing at the Sage.
Oh really? What is it? A concert?
It's a conference called, oh God, I always forget the name of it. I always mix it up with another one. It's a conference. It's kind of a tech conference, except it's much more interesting than that. They get like, I don't know, all sorts of people at the cutting edge of technology and art. And they had a guy from ARPA last time I went, the people who invented the internet. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about research they're doing for implanting things in people's brains so that actually people with no mobility can fly aircraft and things like that just through thought.
Right. Okay.
So, that kind of thing.
Yeah, right, okay. So they'll be running the world then in about 10 years.
Yeah. Just won't need to move. We'll just
just lie there.
Exoskeleton.
Yeah, right. I'm sure that is actually a William Gibson story. I'm sure that there is like literally a story about that, isn't it?
It's amazing that he predicted so much of this shit, and yet he's not a tech guy.
No, he hates computers, doesn't he? Yeah. No, I knew he wrote Neuromancer on a typewriter. Yeah. He was also. I heard an interview with him where he was. He's really nice. He's like a very interesting interviewee actually. But he was explaining how he was writing Neuromancer and he pretty much almost finished it. And then Blade Runner came out.
Right.
And he was just, and he's just like shit, like really started.
I started writing a novel. I had an idea like 25 years ago. It was kind of like the big reveal halfway through was that everyone was living in a virtual reality, that the government had kind of put them there to keep them from making trouble. And then the Matrix came out. Like, fuck
that. Yeah. The Matrix is looking kind of like strangely prescient as well, I think. So you can imagine that, couldn't you? Like all these people who can't get jobs in like the brave new future of, where basically the only jobs will be coders.
Yeah.
And if you
Well, that was
can't code,
basically my idea. Was like it was, unemployment was basically stick you in a tank. You won't
yeah,
cause any
exactly.
trouble.
Yeah, we'll just give you like the brain chip, and you can just like watch Netflix all day.
Pleasure yourself. Hit that
Pleasure
button.
yourself. Yeah, exactly. Like a Skinner rat. Yeah, a rat in a Skinner box.
Yeah.
You've got that to look forward to. Well, you haven't because you're okay. You can code, and also you can like live in like blissful retirement, can't you? In County Durham.
Pulls me out in hives. I don't know. Coding for me is like working in a call center for Patrick, I think.
Yeah, right.
Not quite, and yeah.
So what would somebody learn then? What would be the best coding language, Dan, if someone wanted to learn how to program like an AI to just produce amazing RPG materials?
Yeah, a lot of that stuff's done in Python. I mean, to be honest, it's really hard because it's changing. That stuff will be coding itself at some point. But also, it doesn't matter that much what language you use. It's kind of if you're making calls back and forth to certain interfaces, it's just like you can do it from pretty much anything. That's my understanding.
Right.
I'm really, although I did this AI post the other day, it's something that I know virtually nothing about. My stuff is kind of web applications and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, JavaScript is the language that I mainly use, which is kind of another useful one because it's everywhere now. It's a bit of a it's a real kind of bodge job in many ways, although it's got a lot better. But it's just because it through popularity, it's like VHS versus Betamax, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and the QWERTY keyboard, right? I read somewhere that the QWERTY keyboard was designed specifically to make it like slow to type. It's like
I've heard that.
illogical. Yeah. I don't know what the story is behind.
Worked in places with weird coders who use all kinds of strange those keyboards where you kind of go like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I used to know this guy who was a coder when I was living in Japan, and him it was a long time ago now, but him and his mates they were just like such stereotypes of like coders. If you like imagine a coder, that was them. They were like those nerds in that. Have you ever seen that Simpsons episode where Homer goes to university?
I don't know. It's so long since I saw The Simpsons.
Yeah, I haven't watched it in a very long time either because it's rubbish now, isn't it? But there were these, they were just like complete geeks. And what they would do is they'd go to work all day and code, and then they'd go home at because they were Japanese, they would be working like 14-hour days kind of thing, and then they'd go home and stay up all night playing like Final Fantasy games, like RPGs on like whatever it was, the PlayStation or whatever. They were just like literally like
I years ago I read a few books about hackers, and there was one like they were tracing this guy, or they were tracing this thing that was hacking this system through the phone lines and stuff for about 2 or 3 days, and they assumed it was like a computer automating this stuff because it was so constant, and it just went on constantly over 3 days, and it turned out it was a guy sat at his computer with a potty and a load of pizza deliveries just non-stop. We should probably talk about this magazine some point before we run out of time.
Yeah. That's right. I've got my potty. We can be here for a while. I've got my potty and I've got my pizza.
Well, we've got a game.
We can do it for 3 days.
Game to play in.
That's true. Yeah, we do. Yeah. Well, maybe we should say, shouldn't we, for the audience whoever's watching this, that Dan is in my weekly game, aren't you? You're Finnan. Well, you've been a cast of characters, haven't you?
Yes.
You've got the like honourable.
Finnan Jumbly, which is a bit.
Go on. What were you saying? I interrupted you.
If everyone else is so much up on kind of like Roman, Greek mythology, whatever, and it's the names are kind of accurate. And when you asked me for like a surname for Finnan, I was just Finnan Jumbly. I'm more up on Edward Lear.
Yeah, right. Well, I think it's mostly
and
Edmund.
We've currently got Finnan.
It's mostly
Edmund
on the mythology.
Yeah, he's spot on with all that stuff. So I've currently got Finnan Street Gang building go-karts, which again Edmund was a bit like, where are you going to get these wheels from? I don't know, carts or something. Go-karts with big wheels.
Yeah. They must have had wheels in like pre-Roman Because they had chariots, didn't they?
Yeah, I
More
mean
than
they had
chariots.
cars.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just imagining them hacking something that's like.
yeah, right.
But yeah, like you said, it can be quite sort of Flintstones.
Yeah, but I was going to say that
Speaking
you had.
speaking of 3 Mile Tree,
Mm.
I think you had a blog post a while ago about giving out a map of it or something like that. Is that something that you're intending to make as a?
Well, I don't know. I'm going to go back and forth on it because it's all like I've got
Yeah,
like the dungeon mostly sort of like mapped out, all the contents and everything, and it's really big. Like it could be like a mega dungeon. And I did the first
yeah.
level of it. I did the first level, and I gave that to the 2 winners of the art contest. You know the
Oh,
Larendar.
that was
That's
it.
how I do a picture
Yeah,
of
yeah.
Larendar. So they've got that. There's only 2
It's a
copies
picture
of
of
that in
Darren
existence.
in his.
Yeah. So there's 2
Right.
copies of the first level that are digitized. The rest of it's written
So you
down.
mean we're exploring this dungeon that's not even there?
Yeah, right. Well, it is. It's written on
No.
paper. You see, it's on
Right.
paper, and
I
that's
mean,
the.
actually, I like that aspect. This is kind of one of the OSR principles that I didn't really get before playing with you. That everything does emerge from what the players do. So
Yeah,
our actions shape the world. Like we now have this cult of nausea, which has become like a really big part of everything that's going on, and it really feels like it's a kind of interplay between the existing world and how we shape it.
yeah, right. Yeah, it makes things easy.
Anyway, on from 3 Mile Tree into the Hall of the
Well, I was just going to say it makes things a lot
Hall of
easier.
the Third Green.
Oh, go on, sorry. Well, no, let me actually just before you go on to the wizards. Yeah, so I just wanted to finish off that. So, like, yeah, I think it makes it a lot easier to DM like a old school type game because you don't have to prepare a huge amount between sessions, right? You can just kind of like you can riff on what the players are doing quite a lot, as long as you've got the initial setup.
Yeah, and as long as you're good at riffing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, but it's not that hard though. And it's like the Wizard of Oz. Like a lot of it, just like is smoke and mirrors. It's just a little guy like behind a curtain, sort of like pretending like there's a lot of thought going into it, but actually there isn't all that much. Yeah, sorry.
Just had a thing pop up.
Go on.
Just had a thing pop up saying my internet connection is unstable. So
right.
If I completely break up, let me know. I'm hoping this will record okay. I've actually got my phone slung up on a piece of barbed wire over there running a hotspot, as you do.
Yeah, well, I'm amazed your phone's got signal.
Yeah, this is my hill. This is the hill I come for signal. I've got no signal. I've got that much signal at home.
Right.
Sometimes when it's, funnily enough, on a cloudy day, when it's sunny, I don't get signal. When it's cloudy, it's fine.
Is that because
maybe it bounces off the clouds?
Yeah.
So sorry, you were going to say about the.
Well, no, I was also going to say that's a great setup for creativity.
Thing.
It's a great setup for creativity, isn't it? Because you don't get interrupted by, or at least you don't get distracted by stuff. Yeah.
That was one of my ideas. It's one of my ideas when we moved there. But now that I've found this corner of the window where I can sometimes get internet, it's like I spend so much of my time just going, load, damn you. Yeah, I was saying yesterday, I've got this kind of, if I had a coat of arms, that my motto on it would be the fucking internet is shitting me. Because, I think we all experience that, but I seem to get it a lot.
Yeah. All right, anyway, so go on.
My video of you is frozen. I don't know.
All right. Well, I'm moving around now.
Oh. Yeah, it's completely frozen. I'm gonna this thing is apparently recording in the cloud, so I'm gonna just crack on in the hope that you're moving on the video somewhere.
Yeah. And it doesn't really matter, does it? The visual aspect of things.
And if not,
as long as
people can hear us. I can. Yeah. Oh, you moved. So yeah, talk about this zine. Maybe first of all, where does the name come from?
Well, it was nothing like very sort of like deep. I was thinking I wanted a name that sounded kind of like deliberately sort of not like what you would well, not what someone would tell you. If you went to some sort of like marketing person and asked them what's a good name for a zine, like I wanted to do like the opposite of that. So it has to be something that sounded.
I think you managed that. It took me like about 3 weeks to remember what it's called.
Yeah.
Something about wizards.
Something about wizards. But then I was just thinking, for some reason, it just popped into my head that, in sort of like Tolkien, like lore, there are two blue wizards. So like, there's like Gandalf the Grey and Saruman the White, was he originally? And the brown guy,
Radagast
Radagast the
Brown.
Brown. And there are these two blue wizards who you never hear of again, but they're just like mentioned, sort of here in like
the Silmarillion or something like that.
Yeah, and it's in like, I think it's in some of the other writings, like the kind of the extended sort of stuff that Christopher Tolkien sort of ended up publishing later on.
Lord of the Rings extended universe. I because I read that stuff when I was very young. I think I was like 9 or 10 when I read Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And then I tried Silmarillion, and I was like, this is so boring.
Yeah, it is. It's so boring at the beginning. Like even like I like the rest of it, but the beginning of it is really boring. It's like the first 50 or 60 pages are just about like people singing. Like literally, it's just.
Tolkien liked a bit of singing.
He did like a bit of singing. So yeah, but I quite like some of them are good. Like the Unfinished Tales is good, and the Children of Húrin is good. And there's some other there's about 13 different volumes of like the history of Middle Earth, which is like charts like the progress of the idea. And some of it is quite interesting because it's like the Ents were supposed to originally be evil and stuff like this. There's like quite interesting sort of like alternate universe sort of Middle Earth. But anyway, yeah. So there's
maybe life's too short. I'm not sure.
Yeah, exactly. of all the things to become expert in, like the history of Middle Earth. It's probably it's quite decadent, isn't it? If you've got like this time to get that. But anyway, so the two blue wizards on it, for some reason, I just popped into my head. It was like, oh, what if there was like a third blue wizard?
Yeah.
And I think I had a vague idea that like I could do like a dungeon based on the whole of the third blue wizard, but I never did it. And then I just thought, oh, it's quite a good title.
Am I right in thinking you've not done anything in this magazine?
No, well, I mean, I'll write like an editorial, but I think also I have promised a stretch goal. So if it reaches £8,000, then I will include a little. I keep saying it's little. It's not that little. It's little in terms of like the word count is like a lot smaller than Yinsu, for example. It's a hex map that was going to be me and Patrick and Chris McDowell, the Into the Odd guy, and a good friend of mine called Nathan Ryder, who you probably won't have heard of, but we had this idea that we were going to do like a RPG super group.
Yeah.
So it's going to be like the Emerson, Lake and Palmer of of RPGs.
I do find it interesting that you guys are kind of connected. So you used to play with Patrick like before.
Yeah. So I'd moved back to England from living in Japan, and I had got it into my head that it'd be quite good to get back into playing RPGs because I hadn't done it since I was for a long time anyway. And I went and joined this Wargamers group in Liverpool, which is where I was living. And I started running a game that was about a zombie apocalypse that unfolded during the Second World War. So it was notionally an RPG, but it was really more like a war game. And it was like basically the players were all embroiled in killing zombies in the middle of like the former Soviet Union. There's a little bit like Twilight 2000 actually, but with zombies. And Patrick joined that game, and that was how I met him. And I think he just recently got into RPGs, and so I knew him before. So this is before he started his blog or anything. And I think I'd probably been blogging maybe a couple of years, but then we started playing like regular game, and he was running a game of Apocalypse World, like a weekly game with that I was in, and then I was running a game of Cyberpunk 2020. And Nathan was in that game as well, those games. And then we were running games for Nathan's nephew and his friends who were like just like teenage weirdos.
Yeah.
Or Patrick was like the DM anyway. And I don't think me and Nathan could like tolerate too much of playing that game, but Patrick played it every week and wrote blog entries about it.
Was this the teens game?
Yeah, the teens. Yeah.
I've read one of the blog entries. I didn't manage to find the others, but that's something I'd like to read.
It's so funny. If only they like if those sessions had been recorded. Honestly, it was just like it was hilarious. It could have been a sitcom. It was like you know, it could have just recorded them and like sold them to Channel 4. It was just like perfect. But yeah, so I knew Patrick from like way back then. Yeah, so
and have you played with Chris?
Yeah, and so Chris, sorry, and Chris, Chris lived fairly nearby because he lives in like the northwest, and we were based in the northwest. And it must have been through G+. There were these like UK meetups, and for some reason, we got it into our heads, the four of us, that we could do this RPG supergroup, and we were going to release like it was going to be based on like Greater Merseyside. Yeah. And so Patrick was doing like the Wirral bit, and I was going to do like the Sefton Southport like, North bit, and I think Nathan was going to do like the Liverpool bit, and Chris was going to do sort of like Warrington Widnes kind of bit, and these were going to be like alternate universes versions of those places.
Nice. I like that kind of basing stuff on the real world. So when I started writing stuff, it was based around a alternate version of the Peak District. So maybe if you get someone to do Manchester, we could like all do. It's like,
you could do like the whole country.
You know that there's that city that's kind of planned from, or like region from Liverpool to Hull. We could do an RPG of that. Yeah.
What a fabulous place that would be to live. Well, the next thing, I do have it in mind to do a fantasy version of the Suffolk coast, actually, because I've got family who live like it's really like remote, like in English terms anyway, like the Suffolk coast. I've got family who live there, like my grand.
Oh gosh, what's his name? The German writer, was that who did a kind of psychogeographical Rings of Saturn, Seabold? Was that Suffolk coast?
Maybe, I don't know. I mostly know of it like in terms of writers. M.R. James went there. Wrote a lot of his horror fiction there, and the famous one, what's it called? What's the most famous M.R. James story?
The
one where they find some Arthurian thing buried in the beach. But anyway, that's set on the Suffolk coast. A lot of his stories are set on the Suffolk coast. But it's most famous for like Orford Ness. Have you heard of Orford Ness?
No, is that like buried? Not buried. It's like sunken.
Yeah, it's like a sunken. Do you know? Haven't brought it up. I don't even know what it is. It's some kind of like. I've seen it.
Is there a church under the sea or something?
It's like
the bell rings.
That's near there though. That's a place. Okay. You've got like a kind of like Chinese whispers version of the Suffolk coast, I think.
Excellent. Well, that's the best way to do an RPG. Exactly. When I was doing this Peak District stuff, I started out like, oh god, people are going to pull me up on inaccuracies, and I was like, no, actually, if you go bold, like this is my fictional version, then can't go wrong.
Yeah, I think so. And the real world is a lot richer than anything you're going to invent in your own mind, I think.
Yeah. I played a play-by-mail game once, which was kind of post-apocalyptic. You ran a tribe, and at the beginning of the game, they sent you a square of Ordnance Survey map, and that was like where you started off. So I love that idea of like,
I like that. That's a good idea.
I could go get some more Ordnance Survey and see, or like you go down to the level of like telegraph poles.
Yeah, right. Do you know? This might be interesting for you and the listeners. The DEFRA, which is the Department for Environment, Forestry and Rural Affairs, or something like that. Yeah. If you go on the DEFRA website, they've got basically their own sort of version of the Ordnance Survey.
Oh, right.
And it's the whole country. You can drill down to literally like the level of telegraph poles and things, and it's all in like Ordnance Survey style like graphics. Yeah. So that's really, really good. So if you if you just like looking at maps, use the DEFRA website and you can find that, and it's just amazing. Yeah, and you can zoom right down to like literally the individual house. You know what I mean? It's incredible, and it's got all the names. And the English countryside is full of these like bizarre evocative names that are
Yes.
just really good in themselves.
I actually wrote an English village name generator.
Yeah.
Which comes out with some ridiculous stuff, but it's all kind of like Lesser Piddlington on the Wold Sea or something.
There's loads of, if you're driving around in rural England as well, you see these really weird names, especially like for some reason, I think it's the East Coast because it's got like the Anglo-Saxon and Viking influence more strongly.
Yeah.
So the names sound a lot more like English words. Do you know what I mean? Like they kind of, there's some kind of like deep familiarity to them to like an English speaker. So if you go into like Lincolnshire or Norfolk or Suffolk or even up here like Northumberland, there's some great names. Yeah, there's some great names. My favorite one is
they all have their kind of regional flavor.
Yeah, they do.
Kent, there's a lot of kind of like pre-Roman names, and
yeah. There's a village in Kent I always liked. I went to university in Canterbury.
All right.
And there's a village we used to walk to that was called Battened Ball. I don't know why I got that name, but like, yeah, Battened Ball. Yeah, there's one in Suffolk called Fingering Hoe.
We live when we moved here. My daughter was looking at that. She said, "Oh, you're going to live near Slaggyford."
Yeah, Slaggyford. Yeah. I've been. We rented a cottage near Slaggyford.
Right.
In a village called Eels. Speaking of like good village names, Eels.
We could just spend a whole interview talking about English village names, couldn't we?
Yeah. But we won't do that, will we? They're about the zine anyway.
Well, we'll keep dipping back to the zine for like 30 seconds, and then we'll go off on a tangent.
Yeah.
So you did a zine before. Was it
The Peridot? Yeah.
Yeah. How does this differ from that?
Well, that was all written by me.
Yeah. Okay. And is that dead, or is that?
I don't know. I had it when I was kind of like picturing like my amazing RPG or author / creator career. I was thinking to myself, I'll produce like a big thing, and then a little an issue of the Peridot, and then another big thing, and then another issue of the Peridot, and we'd kind of like break it up. So stage one of that plan worked in the sense that it's like you two in the Peridot, and then whatever comes next will come next. Yeah. There is something.
You seem to have an incredible number of projects on the go. I mean, there's the big one which we might talk about in a bit. The when's the second edition coming out?
Yeah.
There's this zine which, I mean, obviously you're not writing for it, but you're editing it. There's Fixed World that you
But that's just going to be
I noticed from your recent blog post that you started on that. Was it 2016 or?
Well, that was just originally, it was just a little idea that I had that'd be quite cool for a setting, and then I was thinking I'll make a book, but then I realized the more I thought about it, like there'd be too much stuff to put in a book, like it would be thousands of pages long, so it would be better to just do it in dribs and drabs. So I'm going to do that like in dribs and drabs.
So you've done is it one or two of the?
There's one bit, and there's most of a second one that's going to put.
And that's taken you 6 years, and there's how many?
Yeah. And then the other.
So you'll be done like this century sometime.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's another thing that I wrote that's finished, that's coming out in someone else's thing that's going to be, I think this year, it should be out this year, and that's quite substantive. And then there's another thing that I've written, or mostly written for somebody else as well, that I can't really talk about. It should be out probably next year.
You mentioned to me a day or two ago that you had plans for some Japanese poetry.
Yeah. So that's another thing that was kind of like, well, it's sort of like somewhere along the way to completion. Yeah. That's like when it's a little bit you have to go into like the history of Japan a little bit, but the kind of the northern sort of half of Japan used to be inhabited by sort of like pre-Japonic people who were more closely related to kind of like Siberian peoples. Yeah. And so they were gradually sort of eliminated, if you like, over the course of hundreds of years from northern Japan, and they got pushed further and further. and they only live now in the northern island of Hokkaido, and they're called the Ainu now. They weren't in those days, but that's what they're called now, the Ainu. There's not many of them left, but in northern Japan, you still find like these. There are some place names that have got remnants of kind of like pre-Japonic language, and also there's a tradition of people hunting bears in northern Japan. So until fairly recently, until sort of like living memory, people were kind of like semi-nomadic. So they would like move around during summer, spring and summer, and then they would like put, kind of like live in one place for the winter. But during the winter, they had like ceremonies where they would go and hunt bears. And they were called matagi. That's the name for those people. And my wife's from northern Japan, and I was always kind of interested in me that there's this legend of these people who were like, kind of like bear hunters. And then it got into my head, wouldn't it be good? Speaking of like parallel, universes, wouldn't it be good if there was like a version of northern Japan where there were like people who were like werebears who could like turn into bears? And so that's the idea of the setting. And I thought I could write it in like being like pseudo intellectual. I could sort of like write it in poetic form. We'll see. We'll see. But the idea is it's all kind of jotted down in notes. Like it's kind of, I've got loads of things that are just kind of like, the problem is that what I do is like, I'll come up with a good idea and like write down the notes for it. And then that's like the interesting bit. And then the hard bit is actually like writing it down properly. And then I get bored.
Yeah. And then the even harder bit is finishing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the last 10%.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that. But there's another thing that's finished. Speaking again of parallel universes, there's like a Northumberland version of Yoon Suin. So it's like all in random tables and stuff. Yeah. And that's all done. It's just waiting for art now. So the arts hopefully will be finished by the end of the year. So there'll be a Kickstarter early next year, I think.
Right.
So then after that's out, maybe there'll be another Peridot.
Yeah, that kind of random tables generated world, is that did that originate with Yoon Suin, or is that something you were inspired by others?
No, I think it did. But I don't want to claim too much credit because do you know Kevin Crawford?
No.
He did Stars Without Number and what's it called? Red Tide and various other things.
Yeah.
I think he sort of I took a lot of inspiration for what he did because I don't think he did it extensively, but he had like a similar sort of like toolboxy kind of approach where he's giving you the tools to make your own version of the setting, if you see what I mean. So it Stars Without Number. It doesn't just say, okay, here's like, it's not like Traveller where it's like, okay, here's like the universe, do you know what I mean? And it's for you to, like, and I'm giving you the whole thing. It's here's like a toolbox to make your own thing, your own universe, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So that kind of idea, I think I always liked, I know you like John Harrison, so I always liked the kind of Viraconium thing of like every Viraconium story is in like a different version of Viraconium. And so I thought, you could have a setting which is like has the same themes and the same kind of place names and stuff, but like everybody will have a different version of it.
Yeah, kind of gives you that as a childhood feeling. I did a blog post about this a while ago. Actually, it was a comment on Patrick's blog, but then reposted about making infinite worlds, or the feeling of something going on forever. And I think that kind of mutability really contributes to that. That's like you say with Viraconium, that's one of the things, is like you never know. You think you know the place, but then it's completely different, or there'll be a few points of reference that lead somewhere else.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Another idea I had once along the same lines was like a river that was infinitely long, and that could be the setting, and it would like generate itself. So like the idea is you're traveling up the river, and as you go, the random tables help you to generate what's next, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you could just imagine it going on forever. So you could stay put in one place if you wanted to, of course, but you could go back.
It's never the same river twice. What's that?
Yeah, it's what's that guy called? One of the pre-Platonic philosophers, wasn't it? What was his name? Is it Heraclitus? I want to say Heraclitus.
Oh right, yeah. It's another area I need to read around a lot more.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Ancient
Yeah.
philosophy.
Before reading the history of Middle Earth,
Yeah,
familiarize yourself with history.
might do the ancient philosophy first, actually.
Yeah.
I read a really interesting book last year, the year before, called Reality by Peter Kingsley, is it? About, I always get these ones mixed up. A guy from Syracuse, pre-Platonic.
When you say Syracuse, I think of Thingy Bob. What's his name? Archimedes.
Oh, right.
Archimedes.
No,
is Syracuse.
I think earlier than that. The guy who supposedly the Western philosophical distinction between kind of fact and logic
Right.
springs from. Anyway, this book is basically about the fact that we got that all wrong because
Yeah, no, I think you told me about that. Yeah.
Aristotle mistranslated it or something like that because
Yeah, right. Yeah.
version of Greek a couple of hundred years later, a certain word meant something slightly different, and so actually Western philosophy was like a mystical tradition, more like Eastern philosophy.
Yeah.
Really interesting book.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the I think someone somewhere will listen to this and say, no, you're idiots, you've got it all wrong. But I think I'm right in saying after Plato, there were a lot of so-called Neoplatonic philosophers who were mostly Arabs. So Plato was quite influential in the Middle East. So there's another kind of like sort of, I don't know what you call it, melting point there, isn't there? Like the division between East and West isn't really as
well, it's the whole thing of like the Dark Ages and the classical sort of thought being carried on in the Middle East.
Exactly. And there was a lot of connection between Rome, wasn't there, and China, or at least it's thought that along the Silk Road, there are sort of Chinese artifacts made their way to Rome and so on.
It's something that always amazes me. I mean, going back even further sort of into prehistory, how you'll find artifacts in the Peak District from the Middle East, and those trade routes have been going a long time.
The Carthaginians were like big in that, weren't they? The Phoenicians and stuff. It's fascinating. And I'm quite interested in. I've always been interested in the Greek, sort of after Alexander had gone to India.
Oh, right.
There were kind of like Greek kingdoms in like Afghanistan and northern India. That's always kind of fascinated me. This idea of like the cultural sort of.
I read a book about Black Sea a few years ago. I think it's called Black Sea, Neil Ashton. And this thing about the Pontic Greeks, who were the Greeks kind of on the eastern side of the Black Sea. And they kind of carried on speaking Greek and carried on with this feeling Greek, even though even originally they'd been from that region. They just had Greek culture brought there right up to the time, like modern days. And Stalin, to try and break up these cultures, sent a load of them off to Siberia. And then when the Soviet Union broke up, a lot of them moved to Greece because they're like, we're Greeks. And for Greeks, it was like these people turned up speaking a 2,500-year-old language. Like, you're what? That really made me think about kind of persistence of civilization, and a lot of things we won't change quickly, like who we are or differences, or clashes of culture can get carried down for literally millennia.
There's it's quite a well, the world's like way more kind of like ethnically complex and culturally complex than you get taught in school, right? Or you imagine from looking at maps. And I think over time it's getting like more centralized, isn't it? But it's still very very complicated. Have you read Herodotus?
I got about 3/4 of the way through, and then my book fell apart, I think.
Because in that, like, there's like as you probably remember, like loads of it is just like lists and lists of all these different like peoples and different tribes, and different customs, and obviously it's like it's not accurate at all, is it? It's like mostly stuff that he's like heard or imagined. But yeah, you get this image of like the ancient world as just being like so diverse. Like you just walk like a mile in the other direction, and suddenly like people are speaking a different language and have got a totally different culture.
It's got some great gory bits as well, like people eating their kids and stuff like
that. Eating their own dad. Yeah. There's a great bit in I think it's in India somewhere, or at least like what he imagines India to be. And there's like a people who he describes if someone dies, they eat them. And then so what happens if someone gets ill? Like all his friends and family are just like watching him, like waiting for him to die so they can eat him. So
you know what? My daughter, about 3 days ago, my daughter sent on our little family WhatsApp. Someone on Twitter had said, "Oh, I've always told my family that they should eat me when I die, and I'm actually kind of serious, but I think it won't happen because it will be illegal or whatever." And she posted a screenshot, said, "This sounds like something Dad would say."
Yeah.
The kids know me so well.
Could you do it? Could you eat human flesh? You might have already done it. I sort of like feel like in your background, you're like the kind of person to be like, "Oh yeah, I did that once in Indonesia."
No, I don't think I could. I was vegetarian for about 20 years, and then I kind of realized I wasn't sure why I was anymore, so I started eating meat. And when I did start eating meat, it was like, okay, I'm not going to do like hamburgers or sausages. I'll have my first thing I ate was pheasant, and then wild boar, and then black pudding. I'm going to go into the deep end.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I had a friend who was I don't know, maybe you can, I don't know what your experience was, you can tell us, but I had a friend who was a vegetarian for ages, like from like childhood all the way through to in her 30s.
Yeah, same.
And she said like the first time she ate meat, it was just like, wow, it was like mind-blowing how nice it was. It was just like, this has been like, I've needed this all my life without quite knowing it.
I don't know, it took a bit, like the texture is so different from anything, like the sort of chewiness. I did like the taste, but it took me a bit of a while to adapt. But what I really did find that I had all sorts of stomach problems. It made those a lot better. I think if you're vegetarian, you kind of load up on carbs a lot of the time. Actually, that kind of meat protein is something we're more adapted to.
Well, there's all those kind of like Paleolithic, what are they called? Paleo
diet,
paleo diet. They just eat meat and nuts and things, don't they? And berries and things, I'm not sure if I could do that either. I've just got like a box standard.
I feel like it'd do me good, but no.
Yeah, and I like, I like cheese too much. I couldn't do without cheese. Like, unless if you could like make your own cheese, then maybe I could just about have that diet. But
it's funny. The first time, because I did dip in. I was vegan for a bit as well, a few years, but I think initially the thing I missed about not having dairy products is cheese, milk, and then cheese, and nowadays actually I think butter is the thing I couldn't live without. Which you think you've got vegan alternatives, but it's not butter.
Oh, that's good. I really like cooking with butter, actually, like for a fry up or whatever. It makes everything so much nicer. Yeah.
Butter with everything.
Yeah. There's no food that can't be improved by adding butter.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Should we do another couple of seconds about magazine?
Yeah.
So was it kind of like about half and half fiction and?
No, it's about I'd say it's probably about 10% fiction.
Right.
I think there's let me think. Actually, hang on, let me tot up the different things. I think I've got I'm just having a look now at the table of contents. I think there's about 3 or 4 stories.
Look like some of them are quite short, or even
there's probably one of them is very short. Then none of them are long. Like I'm not a believer in long short stories. I think short stories should be short. That's the whole point of them, isn't it, really? So I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 short stories in it.
And is the rest basically adventures or
Yeah, exactly. It's stuff that you can use in your old school D&D games. So they're kind of like a mixture of dungeons and hex maps.
Yep.
Um, some of them are long, so they're almost like I would call them like modules in their own right. So you're getting so like there's one called Moon Rhythm Maya, and there's one called the Cerulean Valley, and both of them could easily be standalone products, I would say,
Right.
standalone books. And then you've got other ones: Offspring of the Siphon, Demon, Winter in Bugtown, Garden of Carladel, Turn of Fortune, Hollow Tomb, Black Pyramid. They are all kind of like their own kind of like. I mean, you could easily get sessions like I'd say 5 or 10 sessions out of each of them.
Wow, so that's a lot of stuff. I mean, what's your page count on this?
Well, it's not gone into layout yet because that's going to happen when the Kickstarter is finished. But it's 55,000 words in total.
It's kind of novella, it's a short novels.
Yeah, it'll be a decent thickness.
And I guess it's not just words; it's maps and
things.
Artwork.
Yeah, I'm kind of. I don't know how much I should say about pricing and stuff, but I'm kind of. I think RPG products have got very expensive.
Yeah.
What they are. So I think it's £15 for the PDF and print version, but I think for that you get a lot of stuff. You get a lot of bang for your buck. I think I've tried to make it good value for money.
Yeah. So I read a blog post by Daniel Sell, Nelsonian Arts Council.
Yeah.
It was kind of about doing stuff professionally and promoting and stuff. And he said that you want to charge 10 times what it costs you to produce, which obviously this is going to be a lot less than that because I produce something for £1.50, and that's a lot less than what you're doing.
Yeah, well, because everyone gets paid for it, you see. And I tried to get like pay a proper professional rate, so it's. I don't want to. I won't give exact figures, but it's a lot less than 10 times.
Yeah. Well, I think
a lot less.
Kind of broken even.
I've broken even,
but not by a
about
long
now.
way.
Yeah. So where it is now, I don't know. It depends when you listen to this, obviously, but where it is now, it's just about like at the point where I don't have to worry about having lost money on it.
Right.
Unless something untoward happens, because you never know, do you? I don't know if well, it could be, who knows?
Yeah.
Like it could be sort of something to do with posts could suddenly get really expensive or.
Have you included postage?
No, but packaging might get expensive, or there might be some kind of like. I'm worried about VAT as well because Patrick suddenly said really scary things about VAT to me, calculating VAT and stuff. So
what was it? Someone, I think it was someone from Germany or something like that. We'd written on the packing thing like it's a zine, and he emailed me like, not having a go, but for future reference, because it's a zine, I had to pay tax on it, and then I had to pay a fee for the people collecting the tax. Whereas if you put it as a book, then you're fine; it doesn't get taxed. So, tip for people sending stuff out.
Book, okay, right, okay. I remember that. Yeah,
which is a strange one because I mean I called this thing a zine because it was for Zine Quest or Zine Month. The line between zine and book is very
very thin. Yeah. I've got do you know Knock?
I heard you and Patrick talk about it, and then I just after that saw an advert for it. I think I looked at it a while ago. I
mean, because that's a book, really. I mean, when you get it, it's big and heavy, and there's loads in it. So, although it calls itself a zine, it's probably longer than a lot of.
I guess it's kind of like in the literary world, things like Granta and
Granta,
semiotext, which are they're collections of articles, but they are books.
They're big, yeah. I used to subscribe to Granta. It's good, isn't it, Granta? I don't know.
I've only ever read one or two editions. It's something which, when I was young, I was like, that's a bit of a waste of time. I don't know. There's just too much going on. I want to read the history of Middle Earth instead. But Now
Yeah.
I kind of wish I had followed things like that. There, more than that, there was a American thing called semiotext, which was a more kind of experimental version of that. And I only ever had a couple of issues of that, but that's something I'd really have liked to have followed.
Yeah. I'll have to check if Grant is still going.
Yeah,
Yeah, I had that as well.
I had the sci-fi edition of semiotext, and there was a story by J.G. Ballard in there called Jane Fonda's Augmentation Mammoplasty, and it was basically just a description of breast enhancement operation, like very factual, and that was it. I kind of inspired by that. I once did a thing. I called it, when I had this pheasant, my first meat-eating meal. I wrote a thing called From Pheasant to Feces, and I just through Google figured out, just try and found out every little bit of the digestive process and wrote it in kind of like William Burroughs style horror.
Right. Yeah, right.
There's some great. There's bits in there called the gates of Oddi at the bottom of your stomach, and the kind of invagination process, and there's some brilliant words. You know, you can have a fantasy adventure in the stomach.
Well, that's like phenomenology, isn't it? Basically, that's like what you're describing, the phenomenology of eating a pheasant. You can get it published in some sort of like high-ranking philosophy journal. Yeah. Speaking of which, speaking of like big like posh books, I've just got Being and Time by Heidegger. I'm going to work my way through that because I think I'm like you. I think I've got to the point now where I think you're wasting your time, aren't you, reading like shit books for entertainment. I think it's like low. I quite like. There's still some like fantasy writers I would read. I think, I feel like you kind of, if you're reading, go on.
Having said that, I'm sort of, I feel like I'm in my second adolescence at the moment, and I have probably in the last 3 or 4 years started reading fantasy after. When I read Viriconium, I've spoken to Mike Harrison about this, and it was kind of, he sort of set out to destroy fantasy. Although he liked fantasy, he didn't like a lot of the tropes. And when I read, first one I read was Viriconium Nights, which was all short stories, which all seemed to be very inconclusive. And I kind of thought, actually, no, life is like this. It's not the quest for the ring. It's like something that fucks up a bit, and there's no beginning or end. It's all middle. And that kind of, I don't know, I felt like I'd kind of grown up and grown out of fantasy, and I get quite arsey about things like that sometimes. But now in the last few years, I've just accepted, sometimes just go with it, read some fantasy, enjoy yourself.
But what's good fantasy though? I really struggle with it now, because I mean, I've read a lot of fantasy, especially as a teenager. But I'm now kind of, I find it really hard to find stuff that
you've been going back through like Jack Vance and stuff like that.
Yeah, Jack Vance. Yeah. I mean, I've read most. I've read all of like the big Jack Vance books now, like on the series. So I am working my way through his back catalogue and finishing off like everything. Because I love Jack Vance. But once you've sort of read, and I like Gene Wolfe as well, although I'm a little bit less. I think sometimes the Gene Wolfe is a little bit of.
You posted an interesting review of one of his books like a day or two ago.
Yeah, what you would really like. Have you read the Soldier in the Mist books, the Latro books? He wrote there's three of them, and they're about a Rome. Well, it's actually, speaking of Herodotus, it's set just after the invasion of Greece by Persia has failed. So the Persian army's gone back, and there's like the aftermath of the war, and the main character is he was a Roman, but like from the days before the Roman Empire, because this is like whenever it is, 300 or 400 BC. And he was a mercenary in the Persian army, and he has had a blow to the head, which means he can't make long-term memories. So he can only make short-term memory. So he can't remember anything. And every day he wakes up and he's got this scroll of paper with a stylus. And so he rereads as much as he can on the stylus to kind of like refresh his memory of what's going on. And then he writes down during the course of the day what he's done. And so that's the way the novel is written. and there's big chunks of it where he's not writing in the diary, so you don't know what's going on, and like, you know, it'll be like 6 months later or whatever, and suddenly he's writing again. But it's an amazing, like, so that's an incredible like feat of like imagination, I think, that those stories are. But I think sometimes with Gene Wolfe, it's like a little bit Emperor's New Clothes. It's like, is he actually really all that intelligent and gifted, or is it just because people say he is? Do you know what I mean? Is he just creating the impression?
Yeah.
Or is it genuinely true that he's really good, putting a lot of thought into this?
Yeah.
So I don't know, but like, I enjoy, but once you've read sort of like that kind of, once you've read Jack Vance and Gene Wolfe, you can't really go back to reading like your bog standard kind of fantasy series, you know, that you see in Waterstones or whatever. You just can't, like,
I mean, it seems to me it's kind of world building, which is kind of interesting to an extent, and then it's like the hero quest, which I really don't buy into.
But the world building is never that interesting either, is it? It's always kind of quite similar to it. It's always kind of like, well, here in this world, magic is like this, and in this world, elves are like this, and it's kind of like,
it's kind of playing with ideas.
So I kind of, I'm struggling. Have you got anything to recommend?
Well, fantasy wise, no. I've been so there's a book, a friend of mine's publishing company, Strange Attractor, put out a book about a year ago called Appendix N, The Eldritch Roots of Dungeons and Dragons, and that's a load of the stuff that's referenced in Appendix N, and a few things that are kind of adjacent. So a load of those short stories, and that introduced me to stuff like Lord Dunsany and Clark Ashton Smith, which I kind of, again, it seems it's sort of purple prose for the sake of it, but it's quite interesting revisiting or discovering that stuff, kind of fantasy before orcs.
It is. Fantasy Before Orcs, that's a good title. William Morris. Well, speaking of that, actually, in the zine, there's an essay on William Morris.
I was going to say that I only, in the last few weeks, I've been sort of digging into Project Gutenberg and finding old fantasy and stuff, and I'd never realised that he wrote fantasy.
I've not actually read The Well at the World's End. I probably should at some point. It's one of those things I've kind of heard about so much, feel like I know what it would be like. Do you know what I mean? Like, I kind of don't feel like I need to read it, but I probably should read it. I mean, it was in the air, obviously, wasn't it? Sort of in the, I guess, like the late 19th century, early 20th century. And it was Tolkien who really kind of made it. He took it to the next level, didn't he? I suppose.
I mean, what I do like is the illustrations that go with it. I did a blog post the other day about Sidney Syme, who did the stuff for Lord Dunsany, and I mean, obviously there's like Arthur Rackham and stuff like that. That kind of fantasy illustration, I really do like it. That's the kind of world building that I can buy into.
It's
but William Morris. So there's a William Morris adventure in
well, it's an essay about the book and about kind of like how to use it to sort of like inspire your games, if you see what I mean. And it's got like a little playable bit as well. It's got like a hex map and stuff that you can game in. So it's that's one of the things that's in there. So that's kind of sitting between the fiction and gaming material kind of border, I suppose. But that's by that Roger, I don't know how to pronounce his surname, Gina Sorolla, who writes the Rolls and Rules blog. She's been around for a very long time as well. It's sort of like since the beginning of the OSR kind of thing. So I'm quite pleased with that. I'm pleased with the contents. I think you do get a lot of
you said so. Obviously, I've seen on the Kickstarter there's a kind of name and title thing, but yesterday you sent me a list of just like one sentence descriptions of them all, and I have to say I was kind of drooling at that. Everything in there does sound really, really interesting.
It'll all be. It's all kind of like worth having, if you see what I mean. It's all. I don't think there's any filler, or I hope there's not any filler in it.
Got a lot of submissions.
I got loads. I was pleased. Well, I mean,
maybe that's because you're a paying money.
Well, it took ages to read them all. That was the only thing, and decide. So it did take a long time. But I was really surprised by the amount of short fiction I got. I got so many short stories. Like I was saying in that interview with Patrick, and I'm really, in some ways, I'm sad that I couldn't include. There's probably about 3 or 4 that I would really have liked to have put in there, but I didn't have enough budget or space really to include them. So yeah, there's quite a lot of there's a lot of talent out there, isn't there?
Yeah.
It's the same with art, you know. Sorry, go on.
I sent you a short story, which I mean, it was just riffing, really. I was kind of having fun. I was totally inspired by rolling on tables in Yunsun.
Yeah, right.
And the reason I did that, I just played my first solo RPG, which is a thing. It's a Mork Borg thing called I can't remember the name. Is some pun on that, and playing it, I basically just wrote out what happened.
Yeah.
And I was like, actually, this is a really good way of generating fiction.
Yeah, right.
And then I thought, well, it's got loads of tables. I know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a fiction generator.
I often find with fiction that it's like, where do you start from? And you know, as in games, which are a kind of fiction, it's just getting those spark tables, those prompts.
Yeah, right.
Set you up.
Yeah, I think I used to. I've read quite a lot of books about like how to write, because I think because I used to want to be a writer a lot, a long time ago. I've given up on that idea now, but
well, I mean, you are, but
well, I suppose so. One of the things I think it might have been Stephen King. I don't know. It's one of but it might not have been, but or it might have been Raymond Carver. But so the idea is, you'll write your story, and wherever you have started will be too early. So you need to start the story much further on than you've begun it. So you can get rid of like the first 10 or 20% of it.
Yeah.
And that's when the story will really start, because you're kind of thinking things through as you're writing. So you don't really need like the prelude so much.
Okay,
so it's often that you can start things later, or you should start things later than you've originally thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think cutting stuff in general is the most underappreciated skill in writing. I know I've got a friend who's he's got a thriller out this summer, which he's kind of getting a lot of marketing and stuff behind it, called 17. I've read it and it's fucking amazing. Right. But he's on his next novel now, and he's like, I've got 125,000 words. It's going to be so much better when I get it to 100,000.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it is, isn't it? It's that's the same with anything in life. I think you can. That's why directors' cuts of films are never as good as the original. Yeah. I've never seen one that's added anything extra, like you particularly want to see.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings.
First really grasped that when I read Truman Capote, and it's just it's just precise short stuff. It's like this just says what it needs to.
Yeah, exactly. It's why if you ever watch I mean, I don't like the Lord of the Rings films that much anyway, but when you watch the extended director's cuts of them, it's dreadful. It's just interminable,
Yeah. I can't believe, well, I can believe, because I felt those films kind of went downhill as they went on as well.
Yeah,
but The Hobbit, my God.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't bear it. I watched the first one and I fell asleep about halfway through, and I couldn't watch it.
I saw all of them because my kids were kind of an age where they were into that, and I think I slept through most of all 3 of them. Yeah,
just it was terrible, that first one. Really, really bad. When you think The Hobbit is like a masterpiece of like compressed storytelling, isn't it?
Yes, and it's also it's kind of quite whimsical and gentle, and
exactly.
Kids thing, and they've turned it into Return of the King squared. It's battle, special effects.
Yeah. And everyone's like emoting all the time. That's the thing I really don't like. Like Tolkien's very like understated, especially in The Hobbit, in terms of the emotion. It's very like British in that way, isn't it? But then in those films, like all the dwarves are constantly going like, no, yes.
Peter Jackson, I used to really respect him, but he's just.
I think he is like a genuinely visionary filmmaker.
Yeah.
Have you seen I haven't seen the Beatles one, but I've seen the World War One thing in color, and I've seen. Have you seen The Lovely Bones? Like it's a very like
No,
flawed
yeah,
film in a lot of ways, but visually
yeah.
it's incredible. Like it is amazing the
Him
way.
who did the thing about what was it? Students in a couple of girls in Christchurch. No
Yeah,
idea.
Heavenly Creatures. Is it called
That's
Heavenly
it.
Creatures?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's really good too. It's a brilliant film. Yeah, yeah.
Have you seen his first film, the zombie one?
I have seen it. Yeah, a long time ago though. I can't really remember it that well, but it's
Yeah,
funny. Like it is funny. I can't remember what it's called now
it's
though.
just ridiculous. I mean, when I first saw that, I was about 18. It's like, I mean, that was kind of mold breaking. It's very ridiculous, but I'd never seen anything quite
Yeah,
quite
yeah,
so over the top before.
yeah. It's got a lot of verve. That's how you would describe it, I think. And also, though, in the Lord of the Rings, the original films, again, I'm not a fan, but I think the first one is good, and I
Yeah,
think it's and again, visually, like really impressive, isn't it? And kind of
yeah. No, I love the first one. Like I say, liked the second one, third one. I was like, it's a bit much fighting in this for me.
yeah, right. I think my sort of enjoyment of the film, you could chart it on like a graph. It's like the more Orlando Bloom is in it, like the worse. Do you know what I mean? Like the x-axis is Orlando Bloom, the y-axis is quality. The more Legolas is in it, the shitter it is. Basically, I couldn't stand the way they dealt with that character. It's just so annoying.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we're gonna have to because we're gonna have to play a game, and I have to squeeze some lunch
What,
in.
what time is it? Yeah, I've got all these things that I wrote down, and none of them I've actually covered. Books, that was a big one.
I'll go on then. Let's quickly then go on. Let's do a quick fire round.
None of them are quick fire. When's the second edition of Yin Soon out?
Once we finally got the art sort of sorted, yeah, we need to once the art's sorted. Well, some of it is, and the text's all finished and everything. So, yeah, it's just it will be out eventually. Don't worry, it will eventually. There will be one when I'm about 60.
What does it have that the first edition didn't have?
It's got a lot of extra like appendices. It's got random encounter tables, very extensive random encounter tables. Now that I'm thinking about it, what are the additional appendices?
There's a bunch of dungeons, aren't there?
There's 12
adventures.
There's 12 adventures. Well, there's 12 modules, I suppose you'd call them, like mini modules.
Yeah.
They're all either like a location or a dungeon. And if you do you want, okay, I'll tell you what we'll close on. I'll give you the exclusive preview, Dan, because I've not done this before. But before doing that,
end the video here.
Yeah, right. I'll have to actually find where it is. Hang on. It must be in here somewhere. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So what it's got in it, extra stuff. It's been edited, right? It's been cleaned up. It's got extra monsters in the bestiary. There's about, at least I think probably about a dozen extra monsters. Extra appendices. So there's the original appendices. And then there's loads and loads of random encounter tables. There is a random coin hoard generator, like treasure tables. So complete treasure tables.
Yeah.
A list of weapons, different types of weapons.
Yeah.
So a weapons generator in the appendix.
When you say coins, you mean like different? I think you wrote.
Yeah. So you can. So
what they look like.
Yeah, exactly. So they could be made out of brass or tin or nickel or zirconium or palladium or lead or whatever, or they could be rods, or they could be circles, or they could be hexagons or crescents or whatever. You know, all kinds of different.
I did a blog post about this a while ago, inspired by something that Luke Gearing done in his treasure book that's part of his Wolves of the Coast, where there's different things. Then you get coins that are like a jigsaw. You need to collect them all to make the set, or coins with certain magical qualities. I do find the idea of like, here's some copper pieces, here's some silver pieces, here's some gold pieces. It's a bit nothing. So it's nice, that stuff.
Yeah, although I think yeah, it's thinking about what to do with it can be quite tricky, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's all very it's okay, you've got different treasure with different appearances, so what do you do with it then? That's the
Yeah.
question, isn't it? It's just
So I quite like sort of additional properties. Like one of the ones I came up with was like coins that are really heavy, and then coins that are really light, like lighter than air. And someone commented on my blog like, oh, you could power an airship with these coins, or you could only find them in dungeons because above the ground they float off into the sky.
Oh yeah, that's quite a good idea. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because I think actually I think that's quite a good way also to solve that problem of people becoming too sort of blasé about cash. Because at certain points, as you know, because this has happened in our game, hasn't it? The weekly game, you're all kind of like 5th or 6th level now, and cash money has become basically like immaterial. Like you can, we've got
a pyramid.
You've got like so much like liquidity. You don't really need, the only really reason you need money now is because to get XP, isn't it?
Level up,
yeah, exactly. So if the money is like harder to get, or at least harder to keep hold of, or it has these different properties,
we're
it
kind
makes
of in
it
this
more
sort of
of a
Jeff
challenge.
Bezos, in this Jeff Bezos state of like,
Yeah,
okay,
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
build a
Whereas
rocket.
if the coin is going to disappear or float away, then suddenly it becomes like a logistical challenge, doesn't it? So yeah.
What if you lose your experience if it does float away?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right then. Yeah, because I'm gonna have to get lunch before we play.
Yeah, you have lunch.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good speaking to you in a out of game context.
Yeah, you too. Yeah. Well, we'll have to go for a pint sometime because you're not that far away, are you?
You know,
You can never get out of the house.
my daughter's going to doing a master's in Newcastle next year. So
really? What's she doing?
International Education and Development.
With a view to being.
She's applying for some apprenticeship at the UN, I think.
Right.
Yeah. I think she's going to save the world or something like that.
Yeah, I was going to do that. I did a master's degree in something similar, and then I ended up not saving the world and becoming an academic.
Yeah, difference.
But I still could save the world. It's still possible.
Yeah, still got time. Not like me.
Well, you could save it with your, I don't know, your AI dungeon. What's it called? It's the planet generator, wasn't it, that you'd come up with? Was that right? Was it
planet? No, deity.
Deity. That's deity.
You know what? There's a strange cult who are actually really kind of good cult. It's called there's a book called The Number 9 Bus to Utopia, which investigates different utopian communities and like came to the conclusion these are the ones you want to hang out with. A place called Damanhur in Italy, and I've been there, and they've built the 8th wonder of the world. They've dug into the Alps and created a system of temples.
Right.
But they also, part of their belief is they want to bring every god into their temple. They're currently inviting like shaman from all over the world.
Okay.
And just before I went there, I'd written this deity generator, and I suddenly thought, oh my god, I'm making their life so much more difficult because
yeah. It's like but what happens when they've got them all in there? Is that when the world ends?
No. What they're doing is the guy who founded it. Someone came to visit him from, I can't remember if it's 500 or 5. No, I think it's 5,000 years in the future from some galactic conference, and saying what happened to the humans. The humans didn't turn up this time round, and so something had completely fucked up. So their job is to shift the universe onto a different parallel so the humans stay around.
Right.
But to do that, they've got to get all of the gods on board.
All right. So they are quite literally
believe this, but it's spurred them to do some interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well,
damn it, check it out.
Yeah, they're quite literally saving the world. Then they are doing it.
Yeah. Or saving the human race, at least.
It's better than being like a suicide cult, isn't it? That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's better than it's better than Jamestown.
They're really happy, lovely people, and they've got a bar as well.
That helps. Yeah.
A guy called Triton who runs the bar and makes a good. I taught him to make a Negroni, and he did it very well. Anyway, we'll end on that. I'll let you have lunch, and I'll see you in
15 minutes.
Of an hour.
Yeah. Thanks for the interview. See you in a bit.
Bye.
Bye bye.